Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maya Luisa. Welcome. So in today's episode, I'm going to tell you my birth story. I think it's time. I gave birth 2 years ago. My son is 2, and I never really told the whole story, but I think that it's very powerful and very important for us to tell these stories so that other people don't feel bad or feel isolated or feel alone in maybe something that happened to you that was similar. But I know that it can be very healing to hear other people's birth stories, so I wanted to share mine because it was extremely traumatic and it was nothing so far from the birth that I envisioned and that I wanted and that I planned for. So if that's happened to you, or you had this birth that happened that's so far from what you wanted, you're not alone. And hopefully by hearing this and also listening to ways that I healed from my birth trauma and the postpartum and all of that stuff, hopefully that will somehow help you in some way to alleviate anything, or just to feel better, just to feel like you're not alone. So just a little bit about me. I am a dancer. I have had a vegetarian diet for over 10 years and really had no choice but to be super healthy because my father is diabetic, my mom is a breast cancer survivor. So I always took health really seriously and identify myself as a healthy person. And so in 2019, we got pregnant, and that was like right before the pandemic. So the pandemic happened and was quarantined with my man, and it was really beautiful. You know, we got a chance to really bond, and he got a chance to just be there for me, cook for me, and just spend way more time than we normally would because we were just home together. And I think that was a really beautiful time for us, especially because we got pregnant kind of early in our relationship. So that's a whole other episode. So at 7 months of pregnancy, 30 weeks, and during the pregnancy, I was super sick the whole time. Like, I think from like the day after I found out I was pregnant, I threw up every single day. Every single day. I don't know what's going on outside, but I live in New York, so it's like planes and stuff. So I threw up every day and was very sick. Nauseous, tired. I would be at work. I had a dance studio at the time. I used to take these yoga mats and lay them out on the ground and have to lay down on the yoga mats, take a nap. I couldn't get on the train because when I got on the train, I could smell everybody's breath. It smelled like cigarettes and coffee. It was just like, it was so bad. So I really had like a rough pregnancy, but it was my first pregnancy, so I didn't have anything to compare it to or to know. Like, I thought that was just normal, but I was enduring a lot and just keeping it inside because I also wanted to not complain, because I wanted to show my gratitude to the universe, to God, that I have this healthy child in my womb. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to be negative, but I also wasn't speaking up and owning my truth. So that's the other thing, kind of just grinning and bearing it, which is something that I feel like is passed down from my maternal line. So a lot of your birth experience, things that you go through, lessons that you learn, is coming from your maternal line. And so if your maternal line, especially in your actual birth experience, so if your maternal line was healing, it will amplify that. Or if there's something that needs to be addressed or needs to be healed, it will reveal that. So keep that in mind. And so in 7 months, I started to throw up more and more and noticed that my body started swelling. And so I didn't know what was the normal amount of swelling. I just knew that my feet started swelling and then my legs. And something at some point was like, nah, this is not right. This is too much. And at that moment, my heart really sank because I felt like I did everything right. I read every book. I read like 9 books by that time on hypnobirthing and midwifery and natural birth. I would watch all these natural births on YouTube and was eating the right things and, you know, just doing all the things. I was exercising stuff. So my heart sank because I felt like I did the best I could. Why is this happening to me? When I got to the hospital, mind you, I've never ever had high blood pressure in my life, ever. When I got to the hospital, so I called my doctor, and I was like, you know, I'm not feeling well, and I'm kind of swelling. And my doctor was like, oh, I'm at the hospital. Come to the hospital. Let me check you out. She was, you know, bien tranquila. So I go to the hospital, and they take my blood pressure. It was 242. Now, just so you know, the average blood pressure should be between 120 and 130. Over 130 to 140 is high, but anything over 160, 180, you should call a doctor. I was at 242. So me being the intuitive that I am, I noticed that the nurses began to panic, professionally panic, like they weren't trying to show it, but they started racing around the room, hooking me up. They're like, okay, well, we're gonna have to admit you. And they sat me, you know, they started hooking up the IV and all these things, hooking me up to all these machines. And that's when they introduced that if they couldn't get my blood pressure down, that I would have to have an emergency C-section. And I was like, I'm a dancer. Like, what? So I was like, well, this will be fine. I'm just gonna do what they say, have them pump me with magnesium because that's supposed to lower the blood pressure. So they hooked me up to a machine, and every 10 minutes the machine would take my blood pressure. And they were also pumping me with magnesium, which makes you like sedated, but also gives you a throbbing headache. So every single 10 minutes, they would take my blood pressure and it would be high, and it would beep, like beep, 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 and they would come rushing into the room. It was like, if I hear that sound, I think I will have a reaction automatically in my body, because it was nerve-wracking, you know. And hours went by, blood pressure is not going down, and I began to notice that now it's not just white coat doctors coming in, it's like specialists with no white coat, just like a whole bunch of phones on their hip. Like, I was like, okay, this shit is serious. And I was having actually severe preeclampsia. Preeclampsia is a condition where they don't even know exactly what causes it, but it's basically high blood pressure during pregnancy. And what happens is your blood pressure gets so elevated. That's preeclampsia, high blood pressure, where they have to deliver the baby so that you don't develop eclampsia, which is actual stroke, which could also lead to death of either you or the baby, and other complications. So it's a very, very serious condition. Again, they don't know why or how, really truly why people get it, but African American women are more likely to have this condition for some reason, and also if you're carrying multiple children and older in pregnancy. and a history of smoking. Other things like are little factors, but again, it could also happen if you're really young and get pregnant too. I think it was like under 16 or something. But anyway, so that's the condition that I had. I had preeclampsia. And they told me that I was going to have an emergency C-section. Now, mind you, I'm only 7 months pregnant with my first child. I didn't have a name. I didn't have a pamper. I didn't have a crib. I had no bassinet. I had nothing. I was so unprepared mentally, physically, emotionally for this. The only comfort I had is in Cuba back in 2016. I was told that I was going to be cut by Oshun. And a cut by Oshun is any type of scar around your abdominal area. So the C-section wasn't like, whoa, so shocking to me, even though obviously it's not desirable. But I was like, oh, okay, Oshun warned me of this. So it was like a little comfort, like, okay, Oshun is in control. And also my son was born on Malcolm X's born day. So that was also another like comfort, because I've always looked up to Malcolm X and considered him like a spiritual father. So that was another comfort. But other than that, I was pretty much in shock and just trying to maintain a positive attitude. But also I was in a lot of pain. So they had pumped magnesium into me. So I had a huge throbbing headache, but I couldn't take Tylenol because I was still pregnant. Couldn't take any painkillers like that. So I was just so miserable and kept throwing up and kept throwing up and kept throwing up. Super sick. And so they had to move me up to the very first surgery the next day, which again is Malcolm X born day. And then I had my C-section. And my son was born. And I remember when I, you know, like laying there, I was awake. I could feel the pressure. They gave me epidural, but I could still feel pretty much everything. And I remember the first time I heard him cry, my body trembled with joy. It was surreal. First time I saw him, it was like, oh. And they brought him to me and they said, this is your son. And then they had to whisk him away. So that was very traumatic because I didn't get a chance to hold my baby after he was born, because he was born at 30 weeks. So his lungs were still not developed. Thank God he was healthy, you know, because sometimes in preeclampsia, you can have complications with your baby. My baby was fine. It was me that was not fine. But they had to take him to the NICU. And I was very sad. And and then it's like the height of COVID. So I had to be in the recovery room by myself, completely alone. And the nurse attending to me was 7 months pregnant, the same amount that I was that morning. So it was really hard. I cried a lot. I wrote in my journal a lot. Like I wrote in the notes of my phone how I was feeling, what I was wanted to say, spiritually, like what ancestors I was calling on. Like I wrote everything down in the notes of my phone. And really leaned on my God sisters. Truly leaned on my God sisters. And being a dancer and having like your whole womb cut open and having that deep abdominal surgery is very hard. Because I'm used to being so, especially as a belly dancer, I use my stomach in such a way. It was very hard to experience that, because when you're cut, it's kind of like your body goes into like a shock, you know, and it's just a deep cut. And the thing about a C-section is that you become a mom very rapidly. Whereas a vaginal birth, your mind has time to process. I'm giving birth, I'm birthing. Like, you have time to really like marinate in that feeling. Whereas being cut open, it's 10 minutes. And so for me, as a wasn't even a scheduled C-section, and it was way before I was even prepared to have a baby on this earth side like that, I did not realize that I gave birth until a week later. It was 7 days after my son was born. I was talking on the phone to my man's cousin, and she was like, congratulations, you did it. You did it. The hardest part is over. You delivered your baby. And I was like, what? Like, my mind, honest to God, did not process that I gave birth. I knew, obviously I knew that I did, but I didn't really understand or fathom or like comprehend for real that I had given birth. Until she said that, and she was like, congratulations. I was like, oh, yeah. Like, I was still trying to heal. So for the next days after the belly birth, the C-section, you can only stay in the hospital for like 4 days. Used to be longer. And it was, the hospital staff was very nice. Thank God I was able to breastfeed. I had an amazing lactation consultant. Shout out to Dara. And, she came, and I was on the magnesium, so I had no energy, no strength. And she literally like put her hands on top of mine and helped me to hand express the colostrum. They brought the colostrum to the NICU. And from there, I started pumping. I started my pumping journey. I took a blanket from my son's NICU blanket, and I would smell it, and that would bring my milk down. And I could also watch him on an app. They had like a little camera over his bed, and I would watch him, and I would smell it, and the milk would come. But it was work. I had to set an alarm for every 3 hours to pump, because I didn't have my baby with me. I had to really work hard for the breastfeeding thing, but it was very satisfying because I was like, well, at least, I'm connected to him in that way, that I'm still nourishing him, even though we're not physically together. I remember being in a hospital, and like, I couldn't walk. I was in a wheelchair from the C-section, and I just remember being doubled over in pain, and just like walking like doubled over, and I needed a nurse on either side of me just to be able to walk. And I was literally like this, like doubled over. And the nurse was like, oh, Maya, what do you do? And I said, I'm a dancer. And I just broke down in tears, because I didn't know if I would ever dance again, or if I would be able to dance the way I used to, like, so many things were up in the air. And it was incredibly painful. Incredibly mentally, physically, emotionally just drained. My son was fine. He was healthy, but it was hard because he got it to be chiquitico. He was only 3 pounds. And I was supposed to rest. You're supposed to rest after a C-section. I never rested. Never. And I didn't take any painkillers. I went straight from the hospital to my house. I cleaned myself. My mom and my best friend helped me to shower because I couldn't shower alone. I had open stitches. And with open stitches in my stomach, I put pillows in the car, and I would lug myself in the car and bring myself to the hospital every single day for 47 days. My son was in the NICU. So I could see him. I didn't miss a single day. And So after a C-section, you're supposed to lay down, you're supposed to rest. Like I said, I did not. I didn't take my painkillers because I didn't want it to get into the breast milk. So it wasn't until my son got home that I started to incorporate rest into my regimen, my healing regimen. And how much rest can you get with a newborn? Not much. But it was, I was up every 3 hours to pump. I was set an alarm. I was at the hospital. I didn't really rest. And after when my son came home, I started to really because I had him home, I was able to process and bond with him and connect with him and rest more because I had my baby in my arms. So that was the first stage of my healing, I could say, was rest. And that was also the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. So I'm on my way to a hospital, driving through protests. And so another part of my healing for me, I had to log off completely from social media. I deleted all my accounts for 6 months because I needed to mentally be present for myself and for my baby, and of course for my man. And that's another layer, is that you have a partner who also gave birth, and having to be a support for me and also a support for him, because men, some men are not as connected to their emotions or able to really communicate what's going on within them or access support the way that women do. We're like, okay, call our friends, we're gonna get together, we're gonna talk about this, we're gonna cry, we're gonna process. Women tend to be like that, where men will more internalize. And so I knew that I also had to be a support for my man, because he gave birth too. So another thing that I did was journal, and I reached out to women who were older than me, who I trusted, and kept my circle very, very small, with only connecting with and sharing energy with people who were gonna pour into me at this time and who understood. I was very selective with my energy. I wasn't worried about outside influence or outside things. I was very intentional about my circle and about my energy. I needed to be present for myself, to lift myself up, for my man, for my baby. And really just kept myself in a bubble, a big old bubble. And that lasted for 6 months. One of the greatest things that I did as well was I did acupuncture, because your body, my body was so heavy, and your organs need time to realign and to get back into place. And so the acupuncture helped to lift my organs up and help to bring everything back together. So that internal body work is so essential. I highly recommend acupuncture. And another thing I did was I started to do my yoga again. I started to do a little stretching way after. I think I started 4 months after his birth. 2 months. It was 2 months. And I did little by little. Don't, don't stress yourself or be upset if you can't do what you used to do. Little by little, don't take it too serious. Just get into your body and stretch and breathe and take your time. So that's what I did. That was coming to me at the time. There's lots of other things, spiritual things too. Just praying a lot to my ancestors, calling upon my ancestors to uplift me, to support me, to show me the way, to give me that guidance. And that was very helpful. But being surrounded by women, especially women who are older than me, have been through life but are not bitter, that was a huge support and huge help in my healing process. And if anything else comes to me about that, I will share it in another video. But yeah, thank God my son was healthy, and it wasn't anything like too serious. But what I did learn is that during that warrior time, I would say like right after I gave birth, I had to conjure up all of the strength that I had within me and really go into warrior mode of like just having surgery, just having all this trauma, pushing through, trying to breastfeed while looking at my baby on a monitor, pushing through Black Lives Matter protests and feeling the collective energy of anger, of frustration, of all of that stuff, feeling that and still pushing through the pandemic, pushing through, listening to death tolls rise every day and going through a hospital where they're treating patients and knowing that my little baby, my little just came from the heavens, beautiful, perfect little firstborn is up in the hospital, the same facility where they're treating these people who are dying. Like, it was so many things. I had to push like a machete, chop through all of that, conjure up all of the strength I had within me to push through, to be strong for myself, for my man, for my baby. That strength that I conjured up, that energy, is fuel for me that I can use throughout my whole journey of motherhood for the rest of my life. That's one of the keys that I got. Because being a mom, especially to my son, because he has a very strong personality and a grand destiny, I had to be strong. I had to transform. I had to change. I had to be grounded. I had to, that energy was something that I use in all of my mothering, and it's needed. And so todo pasó por razón. Everything happens for a reason. And I look at, what am I learning? What is God teaching me right now? Who am I becoming? That's very important, because it helps you to be more empowered in your experience, as opposed to, why is this happening to me? I mean, that's natural, but then you gotta be like, pa'lante, and move forward. And also get counseling. If you had a traumatic birth, I highly recommend that you get counseling, that you talk to a counselor, talk to a therapist. I had counseling that was tremendously helpful for me. I wouldn't be able to say my birth story the way that I am if I didn't get that counseling and understand why these things happen, and understand the lessons from my maternal line that was coming through this experience, so I can be the one to break through those limitations. I could be the one to generate the healing that's needed. So I hope that you gathered something from this. And yeah, that's my birth story. Until next time, I hope that you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe si quieres, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace and love.